Here is my interview with Georgia House Speaker, 7th District Representative David Ralston. Take it away, Josh. I'm here with Georgia House Speaker David Ralston, and thank you, Speaker Ralston, for sitting down with us at FYNTV.com and Fetcher News. Appreciate you very much. You know, I always like when I get an opportunity to sit down with you. I want to talk about state issues, but I still like to bring it home. And although you're Speaker of the House, you are the representative of the 7th District. So I'd like to put more of this into what's going on under the Gold Dome that affects your district, also with the state. Today we heard a lot of debate and the passage of House Bill 316, new voting machines, new voting system. Tell me what passed today. What actually passed today, so we can get a little understanding for our voting integrity in Georgia and the changes that may be coming our way.
What passed today was a bill that recognized that the technology that we were using in our elections here in Georgia was outdated. It was getting old. I think like 16 or 18 years old, which is for you know, some of these systems is a lifetime. And so many of us felt that it was time that we updated that, and I think it's always important that people have confidence in the integrity of the elections process, that they feel like that how they vote is counted, that everybody's got a level playing field. So what this bill does is will enable the state to use the latest technology with the ability to have a paper ballot backup so that we can audit results. I think that's a very fair result. I think it brings Georgia into the 21st century. I think it's a good bill, and you know, we passed it. It's now headed to the Senate, and I'm hopeful they will do this. They will agree with us and pass it so that we can start getting. We can decide, you know, exactly what the technology will be, get it out to the counties, and let them get familiar with it and comfortable with it before the next round of elections.
When you say next round, today I heard in the press conference with the Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, and yourself, that it wouldn't be in place for 19. He's not anticipating it would be in place for elections that take place in 19, but the goal is to have it ready for 20.
Well, we certainly want to have it ready by 2020. Secretary Raffensperger, I think, actually what he said was that he would like for it to be available for those municipalities that have city elections in the fall of 2019. You know, maybe we can get there with that. I think it's obviously that would be nice, but the imperative is to get it done by 2020.
Okay, now when you say a paper ballot, that's a backup. The machine would dispense the results of your vote. You would have that.
Correct.
Okay, so now is this going to be a total list of your vote? Because I've heard barcode. It's not going to be a barcode.
Well, I think that decision is yet to be made depending on the technology that we use. But it will be a total listing of your vote so that you can see that that your vote that you have marked with a marking device has been recorded properly. And I think that's what people are interested in knowing.
When you say you will see, so we will see, even if there is, somebody has said to me that the one system dispenses a barcode, and when you dispense the barcode, then you scan it and put it in a box, but you still don't see that who you voted for is correct. So
no, as I understand it, the technology will tell you who you voted for.
Okay, because I think that's what's probably most important to people, is to have that,
sure,
and then be able to audit that.
Right.
Okay, I appreciate that. Now, let me ask you, what are we're coming up on crossover? What is some of the legislation for rural Georgia where hospitals, high-speed internet, and let's stay with hospitals, healthcare, and things like that. What are some of the things that you need to get done this week that's not completed to crossover? Friday's the big day of crossing over the Senate. What are some of the things that still have to be done?
Actually, crossover day is March the 7th, so we will be in session all of this week. We will be in session Monday, Tuesday of next week. We're going to take Wednesday for committee work, and then come in on March the 7th for crossover day.
Oh, so that's next Thursday, not this Thursday,
Correct.
Thursday week. Okay.
Correct.
So what is some of the legislation that you want to see completed for crossover to get over to the Senate that actually for whether it be health care, and I know the Senate did some things where health care is concerned, but rural hospitals, certificate of need, all these kind of questions, and then broadband and some of the other things for rural Georgia that you're wanting to get through?
We have a lot of initiatives that are out there. One of the big issues this session is the certificate of need discussion. Certificate of need has been a topic here at this Capitol for years, and for whatever reason, vested interest or otherwise, it's never really gotten very far. I think there's an appetite now to recognize that we have created through that system, through the CON system, we've created barriers to access to health care, particularly in rural Georgia, but not just in rural Georgia, but other areas of Georgia, that it's time we knock down, that we give more options to Georgians in terms of the kind of where they can obtain their medical treatment. And so that's what that discussion is about. It's a complex issue. It involves a lot of money, frankly, on both sides of the issue. But it's an issue I think we have to recognize and deal with by putting into our law more of a free market practice, as opposed to having these barriers and making healthcare providers jump through bureaucratic hoops here at the Capitol to obtain approval to add beds, for example. That ought to be a business decision that any particular facility makes, as opposed to being made by a board and a group of bureaucrats here in Atlanta. So that's an oversimplified way of looking at what is a big issue. We have a bill pending in the House now. It's had some changes. It may undergo some further changes. But I do anticipate that we will likely have a vote before crossover on a CON bill that will make major reform to the CON process and to the system as a whole. We have other initiatives. We have already passed and sent to the Senate two bills that deal with high-speed rural broadband. One of those bills removes the prohibition from EMCs offering.
They will be allowed to get into the business.
Correct. And so I think that will expedite high-speed broadband in rural Georgia. We're looking at multiple options on getting that done, because I believe high-speed broadband is foundational to development in rural Georgia. It is critical to business. It's critical to education. It's critical to medicine. So I think it's something that we have to do. And I think we've made a lot of progress on that. So that's a real priority of mine. We have other issues out there I know that we're going to probably take up in the House within the next few days, an industrial hemp bill to talk about rural Georgia. This is something that's supported very, very strongly by the agriculture community. This is not medical cannabis, it's not marijuana, this is hemp, and it would be a crop that could be grown and produced during the off-season on some of our farmland with reasonable restrictions. Kentucky has introduced a pilot program. Other states are looking at doing this. I think it is a great economic benefit to many Georgians, and particularly to the agriculture community. So industrial hemp is something that you're going to hear a good bit of discussion about. Then of course you have medical cannabis. Got some members that are working on a bill there to sort of fix the barrier that was left after we passed Haley's Law a couple of 3 years ago, where we said, you know, if you have one of the specified conditions certified by your physician, that you could get the cannabis oil for treatment. Not smoking, but oil. The problem was that you had to violate the law if you go to another state and get it and bring it back in. So this will address that, and I also I'm aware that members of the Georgia delegation to the Congress are working on a bill in Washington that would exempt medical cannabis from the criminalization of marijuana under federal law. That's going to be something that you'll also hear a lot of discussion about. I didn't even touch on the budget, but we are working on the budget. I expect that the House will pass a version of the 2020 fiscal year budget by Thursday or Friday of this week. And I expect, I'm not going to tell you today, I'm going to make you come back down here, that we'll have some good news coming out of that for Gilmer County that I'm excited about. That will be part of the Rural Development Initiative. So we'll have more to say about that later once it passes.
Let me ask you a question. The Senate today, the Medicaid waivers that the governor has looking at and has brought up, they passed that today, so it's headed over to you on your side of the chamber. It's yours now, right? So what do we expect with that bill out of the House? What are you expecting to do with that, and what might be the outcome of that for the governor?
Well, Governor Kemp, you know, started talking about the Medicaid waiver back during his campaign.
Right.
This is not Medicaid expansion. This is far from Medicaid expansion. This is allowing states to tailor their own solutions to healthcare needs in that state, as opposed to having the federal government impose a one-size-fits-all kind of approach. Governor, now Vice President Pence, did Medicaid waivers in Indiana when he was governor of Indiana, and apparently very successfully. So there is a successful precedent for this, you know, I'm going to support this governor when he's right, and I think he's on the right path with Medicaid waivers.
Okay, I want to switch to the last 2 weeks. Some things that have taken place here in the House of Representatives. You, a couple weeks ago, really started in the media some reports, accusations about legislative leave. You are an attorney. You have a law practice in Blue Ridge, and that you had used your position as an attorney, a legislator with the law legislative leave to not try all the cases. Some are multiple years old. They ran stories about victims. They called it child molestation, rape. 9 members signed on to a resolution last week, which got a lot of media. And you addressed this yesterday. Now, for those that have not heard that, I don't want to go too far, but you addressed all of those things in the chamber yesterday, did you not? In 20 minutes, you addressed your peers in the chamber as the speaker, but as your peers, you addressed them yesterday morning. How did you address them, and what are some of the things that you shared with them yesterday morning?
Well, first of all, I tried to be completely honest with them, and I talked about my career as a lawyer. You know, come March, I will have been practicing law 39 years. I have a reputation as a lawyer that was formed many years ago, before I became speaker. You know, it is true that I do represent people that are accused of crimes. Our Constitution says that regardless of how bad the crime is that if you are charged, you are entitled to a vigorous defense. You're entitled to a trial by jury. I have all the constitutional guarantees, and I think those are important because that's what makes us different than any other country. I don't make any apologies for representing people. I also pointed out that I do reject very strongly, any allegation, accusation, insinuation that I have abused or misused this position under that law. First of all, the law was, the original law was passed in 1905. It was amended in 2006, way before I was Speaker of the House. You know, they've accused me of all manner of, they being the Atlanta media, of all manner of evil.
I don't want to interrupt you, but the revision in 2006, why did they continue to write headlines that this is something you helped write to take advantage? I mean, just go with that. You know, you've read all the headlines that, you know, the 2006 law you helped write in effort to continue to hold your cases out of court. So tell us a little bit about that.
I think from 2006 until 2010, I think I used one continuance in 4 years under the revision to the law. That idea actually came from a prior Speaker of the House who had appointed me and 2 other people to be on a 6-person conference committee on the last day of the session. He suggested this addition that he thought would be helpful in the bill. I asked him what he believed the rationale to be. He explained it to me, and everybody agreed to his explanation and to the rationale, and so, you know, it's a far stretch to say that I helped write it or that I came up with this idea. Look, Brian, in 2006, I wasn't thinking any more about being Speaker of the House than I was sitting here today being President of the United States. I mean, that was completely out of the realm of possibility. We had a Speaker who was doing a good job. I supported him, so I saw. It even dawned on me that this would be something that I would use. You may remember I got elected in a special election for Speaker in 2010 in the middle of a term. It wasn't a regularly scheduled election. We had the first resignation of a sitting Speaker in our state's history, and we had a special election. I got elected. I had 3 weeks to prepare for a legislative session, and then after the session was over, I had a number of other duties. But what they failed to report, and I want to make this point, what they failed to report is this: not one judge, not one prosecutor has questioned in these years my use of the legislative leave, ever. Number two, not all of the continuances were continuances that I asked for. But if it was a continuance, because cases get continued for a variety of reasons. The district attorney may have witness problems, court scheduling. I mean, there are things that cause cases to get postponed in addition to this. But, that didn't get reported. But, what they also didn't point out, and I think this is critically important, I chose in 1983 to come back to my home and practice law in rural North Georgia, because that was my home, and I love those mountains. I practice, most of my law practice is either in the Appalachian Judicial Circuit or in the Enota Circuit, which is Union Towns, Lumpkin, and White. So that's by the bulk of my practice in those 2 circuits. Each of those circuits has 3 judges. Each of those judges has 2 weeks of criminal jury trials each year. It's a total of 6, I calculate right, per county. So it's not like they're having, a trial calendar every day, all year long, because the court has other things that are going on, civil cases, non-jury cases, and so, we don't have as much court going on as other circuits do. And inevitably, at least 1 or more of the weeks comes up while we're in session, and that takes 1 or 2 weeks out of the mix for me. But even when I have had to use it to do the business of representing my district, which I take very seriously, and doing the job of Speaker, which I take seriously, I have had the ability, because of my relationship with the judges and the prosecutors, to go to them and work with them in what we call specially setting cases. And I've tried a number of jury trials through a special set, where the judge will say, okay, if you're not available this week, can you give me a couple of 3 weeks that you are available? And I give them. And I think any judge will tell you that when they have called asking for dates for a special set, that I have offered those up. 2 of the cases, and the cases they picked out to highlight, were very emotional. They read bad. I mean, they talk about a child rapist and domestic violence and things like that. So there's kind of 4 of the cases that got a lot of attention. One of those cases in Union County, 1 in Towns County. What they did not report was that in November, way before the story ever was a story, I met with the judge, and I met with the district attorney and one of his assistants in Union County, to talk about some of these cases. And we agreed at that time, we need to try this case, we need to try this case, 2 cases. And we talked about, and we agreed that the judge would offer up some dates in May or June, that we would try the cases. so those cases are going to be tried. In fact, we scheduled one yesterday for late April. I mean, they're moving. They're moving.
Mr. Speaker, let me ask you, they are moving, the cases are moving, you got it scheduled. I watched your statement, and I watched your statement twice, and you know, and some out there may not understand. I watched it the first time, and the second time I'm going to be very direct. I scrutinized it for sincerity. I did. I watched the second one, and I took my time to watch it. Say, you know, let me feel, and that's a judgment, and I you know, of sincerity, but there's a couple things I picked up. I felt I picked up is through all the noise of TV and media and talk radio, you came out on the top side really in the last 2 weeks of being concerned with victims, and victims all across the state that maybe it seemed like you said that yesterday, that really you really thought about the victims in the last couple of weeks, and maybe victims all across the state that are legislative leave, may be possibly not getting their cases in court when they were. So that being said, also I want you to address that, how you felt about what you come to, what I'm calling a realization, not you. Don't take that wrong, not that you never cared for your cases, you know what I'm saying? But where I'm going with that is you come up with a plan, and in the last 2 weeks saying, you know what, let's look at this. Let's look at this. And if I remember right, you want to do a bipartisan committee. Tell me, I'm going to see the layout, see if I'm right. You want to do a bipartisan committee. You want legislators, judges, prosecutors, victims' rights advocates. Did I get that right?
Correct. And
also study other states that have what you call citizen legislatures like Georgia and how they handle it. So in the last 2 weeks of everything going on, clearing all the noise away, how did you come to say, that's what I think we need to do with this?
Well, we're all human.
Right.
And so I think, you know, my first response was, I felt, I was a little angry. I was angry that someone would question my care, would question my reputation, because I talked about that yesterday too. You know, at the end of the day,
yes, you did.
You know, they're not going to remember anything that any of us do here in this Capitol, but they will remember what kind of reputation we had. And that's the only thing that you can leave your kids of any value, is your reputation. And I take that seriously. I mean, that was the way I was raised, and so so I was a little, I felt a little anger, but then, you know, I kind of just caught myself and say, look, you know, this is not good. Let me kind of step back, take a deep breath, and so I decided that I could choose to be angry about it, and choose to be stubborn about it, and choose, because I had not, nobody had said, and nobody is saying that I violated a law, that I did anything unethical, immoral. What I did was properly within the law. But I thought, you know, okay, people have questions. And I said this yesterday. I said, if I had heard what they have read, and I don't know me,
yes,
then I would too. So I said, you know, we always have to be big enough to sometimes realize when, hey, you know, maybe we need to change. And so I came to that realization that that I needed to recognize that for many people out there that don't know me, that you know, we had to listen to those people, and so I did. So we are going to get this a group together, and I think that it's important that it be bipartisan. I'm going to bring all these different groups in, and we're going to get that group appointed before the week's out and let them get to work and come back and recommend some changes. I'm not wedded to that law. So I think what's important is that people see that we heard, we listened, and we heard them and we listened. And the second thing I said that I was going to do is as a gesture of how serious I take the concerns, that until I clear those 4 out, I'm not going to take another one.
Yeah, yesterday you made reference that you were going to clear all these cases in question, get them off the court docket, and until those are cleared, you're not taking any more.
That's correct.
And because I want to double back, because on the study group that you put together yesterday, you also said, and I tell people all the time, perception is not reality, but it's real. Perception is real. It's not reality, but it's real. And I think you said about perception and the noise out there, and I'm going to call it the noise. And if you're reading these kind of headlines and you're somewhere in Middle Georgia or somewhere in the 7th District or wherever you're at, it just didn't sound good.
Correct.
And that's the people you were basically listening to when you made those statements. Am I correct?
That's absolutely correct. And you know, I've learned through this process. I hope I never get too old to learn. I've learned that the news business has changed. And you know, when I was in high school and college, I took some classes in journalism, and you know, it was just a basic tenet that news reporters reported news. If you reported an opinion or a conclusion, then you attributed it to a source. But I have to read articles about me where they are drawing erroneous conclusions and then passing them off as news without any attribution, without any quoting people. And that was disturbing. I've learned a little bit about what the president talks about when he talks about fake news now. But
well, I'll say I've studied rural judicial districts, calendars, and how it works. And I would say the only thing is, in reporting, the only question I had, and not that I was questioning the victims and the time these cases were there, but the thing I question is, okay, how deep a research are you guys doing into court calendars and so forth? I do want to ask you this, and then I got a couple more things. I can't say how much I appreciate you giving me all this time. So what do you say to, after the statement, some out there, and I'm going to read something here, amazing defiant deflection. Georgia House Speaker David Ralston took to the well of the state today to claim he is a victim in his self-created scandal. What do you say to because I will say this is one of the radio talking heads, but there's a lot of that, and David Clark that just did the press conference that wrote the resolution just said that a minute ago, almost the same thing. What do you say to the critics after your statement yesterday?
Well, some of the people who have been the loudest in their criticism have been criticizing me for years, way before this was ever a story. When this has quit being a story, I suspect they'll still be criticizing. You know, I don't know how anybody can listen to the statement that I made yesterday and say that I was trying to suggest I was a victim. I mean, that was so far from my mind. I mean, I was certainly not trying to do that. But you know, I have to tell you. I mean, it's You know, they're just wrong. These are people who have their own agendas. You know, I know the talking heads on the radio, most of them, not all, but most of them. You know, that's how, the more outrageous, I guess, the more money they make. You know, I think I know who said that one, and, you know, I'm getting text messages last week that this individual was on the radio calling me immoral. He don't even know me. He don't know me. He's calling me a scumbag. You know, those are things that if I think them, I'm not going to say them publicly, and I'm certainly not going to go on the radio and say them about somebody I don't know, just to stoke people's anger and fear, and that's his only objective. You know, I'm not going to comment about any of the signers of the resolution, except to say I'm not running for another office, so I'm not trying to use these victims in these cases as a prop or as as an exhibit in a mail piece in a political campaign. You know, and some of these media people that wrote the story, they don't care about these victims. It's just, it was a good story.
Some of the 9 and some of the other representatives, and I do look at the Republican Party throughout the state. Some of them maybe are using this story in the victims, but they feel you sometimes stand in the way of their legislation and don't let it come to the floor when it comes to some legislation, and I'm not going to get into those, but do you not think...
That's two separate things.
But do you not think that this gave them an opportunity
oh, sure
to drive that?
Sure it did. Sure it did. And that's why I say that many of these people, you know, were opposed to me before, and they'll be opposed to me after. That's just the way the process works here. But yeah, I mean, it does. It was a great opportunity for them to drive that, and you know, and they'll have to be judged. They'll be judged for their motives, like I will be for mine.
I know when this gentleman steps in the room, he's telling me basically time's up. He's a great guy. I'm not going to tell him out there who it is, but he's a great guy. But I know it's the time's up. 2 more things.
Sure.
Republicans, I think, in the House, did you not lose about 11 seats? Was it 11 that the Republicans lost? So is it a little different this year with the new governor, new lieutenant governor, and having the you know, more Democrats in the House? Is it different to charter through this legislation this year and Republican waters to get to 2020 and not lose any more Republican seats? What is it like to try to retain and not lose any more Republican seats?
Well, I think the way that we try to avoid losing any more seats is we have to be very, very careful with our message. We have to be very careful about the issues that we pick. You know, what plays well in my district may not play well in North Fulton or East Cobb or Gwinnett. And sometimes I have trouble getting all my members to understand that. And I think we have to understand that, and we have to strike a little bit better balance about what we all need to do, and focus on those things that bring us together, as opposed to what we disagree on. But you know, I mean, the House is moving along pretty well, even with more Democrats there. I think we have enough Democrats in the House. You know, I think that we're seeing a Democratic Party, though, and I tell my members and people, you know, back home or wherever I go in the state, you know, this Democratic Party is more energized, has more money, and is more united than it has been in my lifetime, ever. I mean, they want to win a majority in 2020 because we got redistricting coming up in 2021. So the people who win in 2020 will be at the table when we redistrict state house, state senate, and congressional districts in 2021. So it's a big election. It's a really, really big election. And I think we have to, we've already put a plan in place to get ready. We started back in December. And I think it's a good plan, and we're working hard on it. I think that I think we're going to be successful. You know, I'm excited. I'm excited to try to finish the session and do some good things for the state.
Last question. Out of the study committee this year, obviously there's not enough time of crossover and so forth, so to get a good bill to address legislative leave. But do you anticipate by next year the study committee having enough information to where a bill can be on the floor and it can be addressed next year?
Well, I don't know that this year's out of the question.
Okay.
I think that's going to be determined by the committee.
Okay.
And if they come to a consensus quickly, then I have no problem moving at this session. But definitely by next year.
Definitely by next year, but there's a possibility we can see it this year. This will be based on the committee.
Yes.
Okay, you told me I had to come back, so I do have on camera you invited me back, okay, because you're going to tell me something about Gilmer County, so I have to come back. I'll see you next time when I come back. I can't thank you enough for your time, and I always appreciate your openness and transparency with our news network. Okay, take us out of here, Rick.